Hey guys, Raya here. I love D&D, and one of my favorite parts about it, honestly, are the dice sets. I've always loved collecting rocks and shiny things ever since I was small, and that hasn't changed as I've gotten older. For a while now, my content feeds have been full of different creators making their own resin dice sets, which I think is just super cool. So I decided to ask for some supplies for Christmas, and I finally had time to play around with them. Watch as I give it a try. Resin dice making takes a lot of supplies. I got a pack with silicone mixing bowls and stir sticks, finger gloves, and pipettes. Then another pack with more silicone bowls, plastic cups, stir sticks, tweezers, pipettes, and finger gloves. This set also came with resin and hardener, metallic leaf, mylar flakes, 2 sizes of rainbow glitter, and rainbow mica powder, a silicone mold, regular sandpaper, and Zona polishing paper. I also got some Plastex to add shine. Then I got some metallic paint pens and rainbow paint pens for inking all the numbers. I mostly got the second set for the white pen, and for the different blue and green shades for the first set I had in mind. I started the first set by mixing equal parts of the resin and hardener. I didn't look up how much liquid to make for the mold size, so I made a full cup for the first set. Mixing the 2 parts together took a while, because you want to go slow to avoid stirring in bubbles, and it takes a bit for the chemical process to start. Once it was mixed, I added in green and blue flakes to kind of make an ocean vibe. I started filling in the mold with a pipette to try to avoid air bubbles in the corners or around the numbers. Then I poured the resin in slowly to try to avoid adding in more bubbles. I think I should have poured from higher up. Apparently that allows for less surface tension in the thin, small stream, so you get less bubbles that way. I put some on the lid as well to avoid bubbles and ensure full coverage. By the time all the voids were filled, the D6 had started to pull bubbles to the top. I used a lighter to pop all the bubbles on the surface. Then I let the mold sit for about 30 minutes to let as many bubbles surface as possible, and then popped them all. I put the lid on and let it sit for 3 days to fully dry. The resin said it could take anywhere from 1 to 3 days depending on ambient temperature, so since it's still winter here, I made sure to give it plenty of time. Removing the flashing was pretty satisfying. It cracked in a satisfying way. It was a bit thicker than it should have been. I didn't push enough out when I placed the lid. The dice looked pretty much like what I pictured, but the raised face was really high, and the mylar flakes ended up rising to the top a lot more than I anticipated. There were also quite a few bubbles left over. I made 2 other sets as well. One set was red and gold. I wanted it to feel kind of like a geode, with an opaque side and a crystally clear side. For the other dice, I wanted to try a dirty pour, with blues, greens, and white. I also tried a new step to mixing. I saw online that it's recommended to set the mixing bowl in hot water to make it thinner, which means less bubbles form. For the red set, I mixed gold and red fine glitter into half the resin. I also added gold foil. For the blue set, I did 4 cups, with green, aqua, blue, and white mica powder and matching fine glitter. I wanted the other half of the red set to be more opaque, so I mixed pink, orange, and yellow mica powders to make a red, since the set didn't come with red. I had to tweak it a bit while mixing to finally get the right color. On the blue side, I did a dirty pour, which is just layering the different colors over each other so they mix together and make a cool effect. For the red side, I did a chunk of the opaque red, then a bit of clear, and then dual poured both side by side to fill the mold the rest of the way. I also used the lighter to pop any remaining bubbles. On the blue side, some of the resin had to be scraped back into the voids because of the pouring method, and they kind of mixed together in the process. Then I capped the mold and let both sets sit for 3 days as well. I tried making a DIY pressure pot with a bucket, bike valve, and PVC glue. I found a tutorial online for it, and it only cost about $15, which is a lot cheaper than any real pressure pots. However, I couldn't get it to seal in the end, so it wouldn't keep the PSI up and didn't end up working. Both sets turned out pretty good upon demolding. The red set had really thin flashing, but the blue set had a bit more. The blue set had a lot fewer bubbles, and only a few dice had a really raised face. I feel like the marbled effect turned out really good on this set. The red set didn't end up with many tiny bubbles, but did have a couple big bubbles in some of the dice. And on the blue set, only the triangle dice ended up with a big void. I couldn't find my X-Acto knife, so I used a box cutter to slice off the extra small bits of flashing on the edges. I used some leftover clear resin to fill the voids on the red dice, so I had to carefully cut those chunks off as well. Then began the monotonous hours of sanding. I started off each set with 800 grit sandpaper, just to get the raised faces off since it's so aggressive. I made sure to do slow, even pushes on the sandpaper, and to rotate the sanded face to avoid too many scratches. Then I used the pink Zona paper to polish the faces I sanded, and the faces that shared an edge with the sanded sides. And finally, I used the blue Zona paper on every face of every dice, to get them all as close to evenly polished as I could. I tried a few ink colors on the clear dice, a couple blues, white, and silver, and ended up liking white the best. It took a long while to ink these dice, since the numbers are so small, but also because I had to do multiple rounds of the white so it looked nice and even. Once it dried, I used a paper towel with rubbing alcohol to get the excess paint off the face. They honestly looked pretty good at this stage. I tried bronze, white, and gold on the red dice, and in the end decided on the gold ink and followed the same process. Sorry, my head got in the way of the camera a lot for this set. Then I tried silver, gray, white, and blue on the blue set and went with the silver. The thicker paint pens were a lot easier to use, since the paint pooled a lot more in the numbers, so it took less work to get a more opaque effect. On the final step, I used the number 1 micron Zona paper for the final polish. The dice all looked pretty good just from the rubbing alcohol, but this paper got all leftover paint and alcohol off and finished them really nicely. It still took quite a bit of time for each dice, especially the more faces the dice had. I watched a lot of shows in the background while doing all the sanding, inking, and polishing. The final sets looked so good. The growth from one set to the next was really awesome to see. The clear set was a really pretty concept, but you can obviously still see a ton of bubbles in it. The red and gold set looked really cool. I wish I had done more of the clear and less of the opaque to get a more prominent geode look, but I especially liked how the gold foil turned out. Then the blue set turned out so pretty. I liked how the mica and glitter looked together, and the silver really popped. I do wish the white had stood out a bit more on this set. And there were still bubbles in this final set, but a lot less than when I started. There was such a steep learning curve with making dice. And I definitely want to try more once I get that pressure pot working. I can't wait to try these out in an actual game. Let me know if you have any advice for making dice, or if you've tried it before or are thinking of giving it a try now. Thanks for watching.